All right, if you are hearing the sound of my voice, then that means I actually managed to get this intro recorded, and you have just hit the play button. This is Jay Brown Yoga Talks podcast. My name is Jay Brown, and if this is your first time to this show, I want to say welcome to you. Everyone else, how's it going with you? How are you doing? I hope that this moment that you're listening is finding you reasonably well. I have been having a little bit of a rough go of it in this moment. Not really this week. This week was not that bad. Everything was okay. Nothing really horrible happened. But things are feeling really disjointed. Does anybody else feel that? I'm not one who's really into astrology, but it's times like this when I feel like there really is some kind of cosmic play at work, or some forces of celestial nature. I know there's the big solar eclipse next week, I guess, or a week or two, sometime soon. We've got this big solar eclipse. I don't know what any of it means, but I feel like something has really been different over this last week. And I've been doing different things like baking a lot. I know I mentioned that I've been making bread. Well, I've been expanding and baking all these things. I've never been interested in baking in my life. I'm like finding a lot of comfort in just baking things. Mainly giving myself stuff to do other than be on a screen. Things that take up time, that involve me not looking at a screen. I hope that you are finding things to help you not give in to the whirlpool of attention and time. And I don't know, I just have been really having a hard time sitting here right now trying to record something. I've been sitting here for a long time. I've done a bunch of takes. Often, some of you have been around, you maybe heard me talk about this before. I come up here in the attic after listening to the podcast and doing an edit. I come up here, I hit record, flows right easy. It doesn't take a lot of work. But every once in a while, it's just not there. It's not flowing. And then I try to do some different things, and I walk away and I go do some other things to try to get myself into a good space. And I did all that as I normally would. I'm still sitting here listening back to these takes and be like, oh my God, does it usually feel this challenging? So I'm just making the reality of that the intro, because I don't know what else to do. And I'm attributing it to something that isn't just me, like there's something in the air, in the ether. And I suppose I'm curious if other people who might be listening to this feel that. And if you're listening to this, then you likely have some connection to yoga or yoga teaching. And if you've been around recently, you know one of the things I've been doing is connecting with people who have been making a living at yoga for a couple of decades, maybe, or similarly to me, and wanting to get their viewpoint on what has happened in the yoga world. And today's guest, Esther Ekhart, is one of those people. Back when I first started making yoga videos, I think it was maybe 2012, 2013, my business partner and co-producer Josh Citron and I, we went online and, did some searching to see what else is out there, what people are doing. And if you went online around that time and did a Google search for yoga video, on the first page, one of those people would have been Esther Ekhart at EkhartYoga. She just got in at an early time and has just always been around all these years. Whenever I do a check to see what are people doing, what's going on, Esther's still there. And I've never met her before, but I've just tracked her all these years. And recently, with everything that's been going on, her name came up again, and I finally reached out. And I'm so glad that I did. It was really rewarding to touch base with her and get things from her vantage point. So, very cool to have connected with her, and I'm glad to be sharing that with you today. Real quick before we get to that, let me mention that if you want to connect with me in other ways outside of listening to the show, there's certainly ways for us to do that. I've got ongoing live classes and a discussion group and a new on-demand video course, all kinds of ways that we might be able to learn together. I want to also take a moment to just once again make a little bit of a plea for podcast premium subscriptions. If you didn't know, the most recent 52 episodes of this show are always free in their full length on our public feed. All the other archive episodes, the 350 plus episodes that are in the archive, are first half free on the public feed now. But you can also get full access to all the archives and be a supporter of this show by having a podcast premium subscription. And honestly, this week, I got an email from the host provider for the podcast, like the place that I host my podcast. They reached out because they see the numbers of the show. And now there's all of these AI-driven dynamic insertion ad stuff that they do. So basically, they're like, based on the numbers that we see in your show, all you have to do is turn on the ad insertions and you can make this amount of money a month. And there's like a little calculator and everything. And I have no interest in doing it. I really dislike when I hear those ad insertions on other people's podcasts. And if it was a lot of money, I would really have to consider it more. But it's not that much money, but it's enough money that it sometimes feels like I'm being dumb for not doing it. But here's the deal. I only need 60 of you. 60 people who are regular listeners who are not already subscribed. If you are already a premium subscriber, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. But if you are someone who is a regular listener who is not, for as little $5 a month, you could really help support the show and help us not have to feel the pressure to give in to these corporate entities that have all the money to throw around to do these ads on little podcasts like mine. So sorry to do that. I really hate doing this, but ultimately I feel like I need to. So that's the deal. 60 of you is what I'm shooting for. If 60 of you could become podcast premium subscribers, it would really make a difference, and I would greatly appreciate it. Other than that, I also have an in-person gig coming up. I'm going to be in Austin, Texas, May 4th and 5th. So if you're anywhere around there, I would love to hang out with you. So you can find out about all of that stuff at jbrownyoga.com. Okay? That's it. We're just going to let that be good enough. I will touch base with you on the other side. But let's go ahead and listen to this conversation that I had with Esther Ekhart. Hi.
Hey. Hi, Jay.
Nice to meet you, Esther. Although I feel honestly, strangely like I know you, even though we've never met, only because your name has been present in my mind for many years, because I've just known of you and sort of tracked you from afar because we both were doing online yoga video.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that it's taken me this long to have you come on the show. but I feel like there was good purpose to it. Like the timing of it made sense to me as I was getting ready to talk to you. I was like, oh, this is probably the best time for me to be talking to Esther in all the time that I've been doing this show. So sometimes there seems to me to be other forces at work in terms of how these things happen. And I really appreciate you doing this. Thanks for giving me the time.
Yeah, sure. No, I'm happy to finally be here. And I think it must be the perfect time, otherwise it wouldn't be now.
Exactly. And I have a feeling you're familiar with this show, but just to say, I am already recording, and I'd like to consider us having just begun. Is that okay with you?
That's absolutely fine. Thank you for letting me know. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I like the initial moments like we just had, those real moments, to be part of the show. And in the past, I wouldn't say anything and then tell people a little bit later, and then it would be like, oh, I didn't know. And then I don't like that, but I also want it to be just the actual conversation that we're having. So appreciate it.
I think that's cool. Yeah, nice. Nice to be here.
Yes. And, for people listening who may not be as familiar with you as me, I know you because you were an early pioneer of online yoga video. And I would say, if I'm not mistaken, that was what we would call nowadays on-demand video. So it wasn't like live streaming or Zoom calls. It was you shot a video and then you put it up there and people could watch it, right?
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah, I did. It was a little bit at the same time as I started YouTube. So, yes. And then we made a video and it sold. Nowadays it wouldn't.
Well, hold on. We'll get there, because what I would also say is that for me, I made my first yoga video, I believe it was like 2012, 2013, right when I think you started EkhartYoga, right? Mm-hmm. And it was a DVD. And we knew it was a dying medium. We knew that the DVDs were going away, but
exactly.
But we did it almost because like all of before me, they were all DVDs. There was the Rodney Yee DVDs. There was the Gaia DVDs. There was all these DVDs that we were using. And even before that, there was the Richard Freeman VHS tapes that we all had, right?
Yeah.
So we made the DVD just almost with nostalgia. And then it soon became DVD/downloads.
Okay. But did it work still for you?
Initially, yeah, it was a nice little thing that happened. I mean, maybe not, I don't know, we can talk scale later, but what I would say is that for me at that time, they were literally downloads. Like people went to a share folder and downloaded the files. It wasn't even like we have now. And I'm saying all this because some people weren't around at that time, or like the early formative times before it became what we all know now with these Zoom calls,
Yes, exactly. Yeah, no, it was a totally different world.
Well, so to give it a little bit more background, I'm curious about you. I'll say one funny thing. I don't know your name, Ekhart, because I always thought Eckhart Tolle, right? And one time I went to your site and there was a quote from Eckhart Tolle. And for a second, I thought there was like a thing where you were like the yoga for Eckhart Tolle, but not at all the case.
Not the case. I wouldn't have minded that at all either, but no.
I know there's a quote, but in any case, I would say that for me, there was a background of like kind of, I don't know, I had a yoga center for a better part of 10 years in Brooklyn, where I kind of cultivated what I was doing as a teacher before there was a camera in front of me. Like I didn't start making Instagram videos. You know what I'm saying? Like there's a different thing now. So I'm curious about that for you, because when I was looking at your bio, you come from a very different kind of background for me, but we came to similar places, it seems, even in your philosophy, because I listened to some of your recent talks too. First thing, we were born the same year, we're the same age.
Oh, really? Oh, cool.
Yeah. But I believe you were born, where were you born again?
Nigeria.
Mm. And your mom was a yoga teacher and a yoga therapist, you said? And did she have some other incarnation before that, or she was always that in your whole life? Like,
no, she started to become that in my early teens. Yeah.
So you watched your mom get into yoga in your early teens.
And that was transformational for me. Yeah, just to see her change.
So you saw something really good happen in your mom, and it was because she got into yoga.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And what was the yoga that she was doing at that time, back when in Nigeria?
No, back then we were back in Holland. But
that's right. I'm sorry. You moved when you were young to Holland.
Yeah. But she was, proper Hatha yoga.
I see.
Yeah. Traditional Sasvita Hatha yoga.
And were you ever at a point where you like wanted to go against your mom's yoga and like not be into yoga because your mom was into yoga?
Yeah, like in the beginning when I remember, and it probably was also because of my older sisters. I've got two a little bit older sisters, and my mom started to get into yoga, and we were all like gray socks, this fake. We now get a mom that's out there. We don't want that. But then, my mom wasn't always happy, and she didn't look after herself very well, and she started changing. So I started seeing that she got a lot fitter and looked better, and so then I started to become curious. So my sister stayed resistant, and I didn't. So I sneaked into the yoga sessions with her, and thought, I want that too. But I see something in her that's good for her, and I want that too. So, and then I noticed it's not actually that easy. I mean, that was the physical practice that I started with. Even a sun salutation for a 10-year-old girl wasn't actually that, I don't know how old it is, somewhere around that, maybe a bit younger. Wasn't that easy. And, but I always had that thing where I closed my eyes as a child for very long periods of time, and it partly was maybe to escape, but also to find something that I didn't find when my eyes were open. So I would escape, but I would ask the question. What am I? Who am I? Like I always had this thing where I was, what is this? What is this life? And I could never figure it out. But the journeys of asking that, and am I the teapot, and am I, what's this hand, and got me to places where I got a sense of I'm not dependent on what happens outside. That I found very early on. Not that what happened outside didn't influence me, of course it did, but I knew it didn't have to. I knew there was something else there that I could find happiness. Even in the midst of whatever happened in our home and whatever was going on, I could go inside and be okay, and really be okay. And so that has influenced everything in my life. It was never about the physical practice of yoga, although I got stuck in that too. But it was always as well about being able to influence how you feel, and.
It's very interesting to me that. Again, your first exposure or models for yoga was like your mom becoming a better mom, not necessarily like being able to do poses or anything like that. Yeah. And I currently have a 14-year-old daughter and a 9-year-old daughter. And my 14-year-old, just like her way she is not at all kind of open to like whatever my sense of spirituality or sense of self or being in the world. But my 9-year-old, and people who listen to the show, she's been on 2 times because she likes to come on the show and talk from her heart, and she's got some wisdom in there. So I could see the same in your story. I read in your bio also that you took this trip to Philippines where you met these healers, and I was very intrigued by that because I never had any experiences in my life that were of a more mystical nature or seemed to go against whatever secular materialist frame I was born into. But it seems like you did. So how old were you when you went on this trip to Philippines? And maybe you could share some of what happened there.
Okay, so how old was I? I went with my mother, but I also went part by myself. So I can't have been that young. So I must have been about 17, 18. And I went to a trip to Australia by myself for a couple of months, and then we met in the Philippines together. So I had this. I also went to India to a guru, but anyway, we'll stick with the Philippines.
And, we'll go back to the guru, but stick to the Philippines. Go ahead.
And I read a book and about those healers that heal with their hands, but they actually go in the body and operate. I was intrigued. I wanted to go. I had it in my mind. I don't know why. It's not that necessarily that I wanted to become a healer. It wasn't that, but it was just apparently something is possible that I don't know. And again, and my mom was petrified. She didn't want to let me go alone. So I said, well, then you'll have to come. So that's what she did. So she came, and it was a really beautiful time. So for us together was really beautiful. My mom was also a very wise woman. So I had that chance in the Philippines. I had time to ask her questions. She said, well, ask, because sometimes the answers only come when something is asked. So I got a lot of wisdom from my mom at that time. And then together we visited, we stayed with one of the healers. She knew some people who knew people. So we ended up with this woman who was beautiful. And she first of all housed a lot of students who didn't have money to be housed near to the university. So she supported so many people. And there was a circle of healers, and they would all come together a Sunday a month, I believe, if I remember it well. Not all the time, but sometimes for the people with no money. So it wasn't somewhere the people came and paid for healing. It was actually in a church for those that had nowhere else to go. And I got involved. She taught me things, how to prepare a body for the healing. I did that. Like, I was massaging people, I moved their bodies, I just did what they told me to do. And then
Can I ask you a question? When you said earlier about like the healers who go in, are you talking the ones who like supposedly reach in and pull out the pieces of flesh? I saw all kinds of videos like debunking that and talking about how they're frauds and they've got like chicken meat in their sleeves that they're pulling out. Do you think did you see something that made you feel like that was legit, or do you think that they were running scams and doing placebo? Because again, that could like actually make someone feel healed and be better even. You could actually get a good result from a fake treatment. Do you remember, did you see that stuff? Is that what we're talking about? Yes,
we are talking about that. I mean, I didn't see flesh being pulled out, but I did see hands disappearing, and I saw blood and things that I can't explain. And my mother did too, and she wasn't as believable as I was. But I agree with you. Like, I can never say I know for sure, because how can you? Because
you were 17 or 18 and young and impressionable, and
exactly,
these guys were pros or whatever.
Yeah, and I can be fooled now, so I'm sure I could be fooled then. Yeah. So I'm not, but at the same time, they weren't asking money. They weren't asking.
That is very significant, because they weren't like doing this to run scams and grift and make profit off people. They were doing it for free to help people.
Yeah,
right?
We really got in through a very trusted source. There wasn't money going around, not from us to them either. It wasn't what they were after. They were really healing the poor. So even if it was placebo, I don't mind. It worked.
If it was a show, interesting.
Yeah. But to me, it was praying, it was being together. It wasn't just that. There was
all the other stuff, preparing and all of it.
Yeah. It was beautiful. And I felt so much energy, and whether that can also be mind made, you don't know, but I felt it, so I felt a lot happening, and but it was a beautiful experience. What it did for me, and it was interesting too, because my father is a doctor, so he obviously was not open to this at all. But he also trusted my mother. My mother was a clever woman, she wasn't so impressionable, and in a way, neither was I. I wasn't completely. I didn't believe everything. I was just curious. And
was your mom convinced? Did she think it was?
She was pretty convinced. We were both pretty convinced, and we came away both thinking, in different cultures, different things are possible. And the way they explained it as well, and they didn't always go in the body. It was also, a lot of it was just hands-on or energy work, and sometimes once or twice I've seen them gone in. And she said, I'm just following a light. Yeah, one of the healers said, I'm following a light. And another healer said, my vibration changes and I can merge. Yeah, I don't know.
I think that's interesting, and why I asked about it is exactly that. That's an experience that, in some way, opens up in your mind the realm of possibility. Like it widens the scope of what might be possible in life. And some people, again, I know people. I've been having these conversations around, a materialist or secular frame, and how yoga really doesn't come out of that. That's a lot of times it's being sold within that, but it's not where yoga comes from. And yoga does actually challenge that worldview in many ways. So it's interesting to hear that you had these formative experiences. You also mentioned that you went to India. I took a trip there in 1998 for a couple of months. I tried to find a guru, but I didn't find one. I found a teacher too, but what was your experience? You said you spent a little time with a guru there. Who was that, and what was that like?
Well, that's very controversial too. That was Sai Baba at the time.
Yes. So did you see Sai Baba materialize the thing and do the miracle?
Yeah, I saw him do his trick with the vibhuti stuff.
Were you convinced at the time of that as well? Because I know I've had mixed reports about Sai Baba, but...
Yeah. I kind of thought, why not? I just came from the Philippines. I was...
I just saw someone reach into somebody's body, so I guess this guy can materialize some stuff in his palms, right?
Yeah, that's it. Why can someone do that and not that? And I wrote many of his books, and his books are beautiful, but I don't know now. I honestly don't know what I would think if I would read one of his books now, but I know at the time when I was 16, 17, reading Sai Baba's books really went far inside of me, the wisdom of that at the time. I loved that. I loved the love in it, I can't really remember what the books were about anymore, but I just know they had a big impact. And so being there was interesting. There were so many people, and it's again like this, what happens in a place like that with so many people and one person that it's all about, it starts to become this, how do you call that? Pressure cooker. Yeah, so it becomes this pressure cooker where you also, and I think India is anyway, where you start seeing yourself, but not only your beautiful sides. Like I didn't have an easy time there. I don't know why, but I met some sides of myself that I was like, ooh, I don't like this woman very, very much.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I've been there. You find the dark side of stuff sometimes. And the shadows, that's what they call shadow work, right?
Yeah. And it was interesting. And it was good because I was in a safe environment where I could meet these parts of myself and talk to people about it and love them. Maybe not immediately into healing, but learning to love them, and later on maybe into healing. Yeah, so it was good. There was a lot of fear, but there was also jealousy, and there was all sorts of things came up that I wasn't necessarily so aware of before. It was humbling. It was good.
Yeah, I had a similar experience when I took a trip there. I hadn't really traveled much outside of the United States before, and just to be in that part of the world and the way time worked, like trying to find the right train. I mean, everything happened different there. And for the first few weeks, I just was miserable. And then at some point you had to surrender. You had to let go of the way that you were identifying and the way that you thought life was supposed to be and the way that who you thought you were, and all of that had to fly out the window. And then there was sort of a momentum of that place and the time that you're there that took over, and you were in life in a different way than I had been.
Yeah, it's that surrendering and at devotion. I learned devotion and surrendering.
Devotion and surrender. See, that's interesting that you use those two words. We'll come back to those. But I guess what I'm curious about now, I mean, first of all, at the time, did you question it at all, or were you fully a Sai Baba disciple, or was there some part of you who was like, this is cool, but I don't know, there's some part, was there little red flags for you at all? Because it is basically cult situation, right? You said a pressure cooker.
I'm not a disciple person anyway. I think I have really interests. I can follow someone for a while, but I have always a little bit of a healthy question mark with myself. So, and with everyone, everybody has an ego who is alive, and the ego can have softened, and you can be very wise. But I believe all those egos are able to raise their head, possibly ugly. So I loved Sai Baba. I loved the experience. I loved his books. I loved what I learned. He taught me, being there taught me to, and that's what he said or wrote. We spoke to him, and he said to me as well, like, whatever you've gone through in the Philippines, he knew, and here, don't try and convince people. Like, really just have it in your own heart for your life, for how it informs your life. And that, I think, because I was confused after all that. Of course, I come home in Holland, and there is this normal life going on with all these people.
The whole other world thinks that's crazy or primitive, right?
Yeah, and they're not believing these stories. So I didn't try and persuade them. I didn't even talk about it unless someone asked. So my sister, for example, who is super, how do you call it?
Normie, or whatever.
Yeah, but also very careful in believing anything. Like, so she knew what I was doing. So she talked to us about it, and she tried to just go like, but ridiculous, and you don't believe that, and blah, blah. And I let her, and I was like, yeah, well, I can imagine you think that way, and I'm not 100% sure, but this is what I experienced. And I didn't try and convince her. And then she got interested, and she turned, and she is just as spiritual as I am now, and she said it herself. It's because you didn't try and convince me, and because you changed, because you were someone that I was actually going like, hang on a moment, like I had with my mom, I want what you've got. And so I learned, all I can say is it was good for me. That doesn't mean it's good for everyone. And it certainly doesn't mean that Sai Baba didn't do things that he may have not have shouldn't. That I honestly don't know. How do I know? Yeah.
But that was such a smart teaching he said to you, or because that was essential for you to be able to kind of like integrate. Because if you had tried, it would have caused so many problems for you to try to tell everybody what you had seen or whatnot.
And I would have given it away. Yeah.
And up until this point, what's interesting to me, we're talking about your early yoga, and we haven't talked about going to like an asana class yet. Were you doing asana at all this time? I mean, your mom was doing hatha yoga, you said earlier, but with these guys in Philippines and with Sai Baba, there wasn't any, it was just experiences of being in the moment and maybe certain philosophical discusussions, right?
Absolutely. It was just that. My mom and I would do a bit of asana on the side together, just, but no, it wasn't about that at all, at all. Not in the Philippines, not in, it was praying, it was being together, it was enjoying each other's company, it was sharing, it was the healings with Sai Baba, it was the singing, the chanting, the being, the waiting, the devotion, because that's what that is, and surrendering to also what you're saying. Like, you could sit there for hours before anything happened. That wasn't fun.
I had a totally different relationship to boredom.
Yeah.
And like stillness and time for that period. That I look at my kids now on their freaking on the phone, and I'm just like, oh my God, what's happened? But speaking of which, I also noticed in your bio that after you had this time with Sai Baba and in the Philippines, you did go to school and mentioned that you had like a brief moment to study psychology. And I thought that was interesting because they just had someone on who's kind of bringing aspects of clinical psychology together with yoga and looking at the overlap of it. Mm-hmm. And I was kind of reflecting on that. And I was like, and I asked her about this, and I'm sure there is overlap, but there also seems to me certain aspects of psychology that would kind of suck the magic out of it. Almost in the way for me, certain ways of studying anatomy did that for yoga. So I'm curious, why didn't you stick with psychology.
For that reason.
Yeah.
I just didn't enjoy it. I mean, I enjoyed parts of it, but for me to, even all these studies and these research that you had to kind of go through and do and understand, while I already knew the outcome, I was like, what's the point?
Yeah.
I just didn't get it. Like, you know what this will lead to. I thought I knew. And,
but isn't that the idea? See, sometimes the idea behind certain approaches to medicine, you want to know what the outcome's going to be. See, that's the difference in a way. There's sort of like a protocol that leads to an outcome that's been researched and proven to be what the outcome will be. It's very interesting. And again, I'm not it's been effective in lots of ways. I'm not trying to say anything against it, but it's just a way of entering into a process. I mean, maybe it's not a process when it's like a protocol, but like there's a difference. We used to say there's a prescriptive approach and a process approach.
Yeah, well, that's it. And I just didn't go well. I think I've never done anything the way other people do it. Like, not my school. I've never been in primary school or secondary school. I wasn't hardly ever there. Like, I would just falsify signatures. I just couldn't do it. It was just, to me, I just didn't understand it. I couldn't be there. I got my grades. I went through it. But same with psychology. I just didn't see myself doing it for 4 years. I did my first year and then I left. And then I found social studies, which was a bit more soft. And I could do things a little bit more my own way. And I traveled within that study. I went to Nicaragua. I worked for a women's project. I set up a little school. And this is how I got through it, through experience, writing plans and thesis and I got extra, I was allowed, I got extracurricular. They let me do things other people weren't allowed. I don't know why, but so I got away with stuff. And
that you couldn't get away with now is a good point to be made, but I'm betting, because that happened for me. There's all kinds of things that happened for me that I don't think could happen for people now, similarly.
Yeah.
But
exactly.
I guess when does actual asana, like, are you doing asana practice yet? I saw somewhere that you decide to do a yoga teacher training at some point. When does that happen? When does a yoga focus become more part of it?
So when I came back from that trip in the Philippines and India, that's when I started my yoga teacher training, when I came back from that. So I was 18 when I came back.
And why did you think to do that? If you hadn't done any yoga direct, were they talking about yoga even though you weren't doing asana?
No,
what made you decide I'm going to do yoga teacher training after those trips?
Yeah, because of my mom. I suppose that was still that influence. And I needed to do something as well. And I couldn't find really so I did it probably at the same time as psychology. I'd say I'd started psychology then and did my yoga teacher training. I think I did that at the same time. And I think because I couldn't find it anywhere else, I thought, let's have a look if it's there, if I can find it there in the yoga teacher training, just the more, I don't know, depth, more sensitive.
What was the training? Where was there a lineage, or what was? I'm interested in the comparison. We talked about the psychology side of it. Well, what was the yoga training side of it like?
Yeah, so it was a Dutchman, Jos, who's great, and it's the lineage of Sasvita. I don't know if you've heard of Sasvita before. So he was an Indian. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. This is a long time ago, but it was a little bit. It's something on its own, but it really is hatha.
So what do you remember of the training? Was it doing asana practice? Were you studying sutras? What do you remember of the training?
Definitely asana practice for sure. That was a big part of it. So I learned to teach asana. But
and was it also, like, if you had to place it now, knowing what you know about all the different styles, like was it like a Shivananda kind of thing, knees, chest, chin, or what? Where would you put it in the world of styles of yoga? Because there was no styles back then, but now we have styles. Where would you put it now if you had to describe it?
Good question. Where would I put it? Probably maybe Sivananda, because it had a strong background of philosophy as well, and embedded in something more than asana. So maybe Sivananda would be, I mean, the physical, because it was all the physical poses, and they
like,
were.
did you do sun salutations?
Absolutely, yeah. Sun
And
salutations.
did you do knees, chest, chin?
I'm sure I did.
Yeah. Then I would say Shivananda. That's
exactly.
the signature, because it wasn't a jump back, right? It wasn't a Ashtanga, right?
No,
and it wasn't
no.
Iyengar where you wouldn't have done any sun salutations at all, right?
No, it was Sivananda. I'd say Sivananda, if you have to put it anywhere, for sure.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of philosophy, but I know on my 18th and doing psychology training, I have to be very honest, I slept through some of the philosophy.
Of course, me too. It wasn't until years later that I actually went back and really looked at it deeper when you get older, or something.
Yeah. So that it was a big part of it, but I had trouble staying awake for anything but asana.
I see. And did you start teaching?
I finished 3 years later or something like that. I started teaching a bit, but I was still very young. And I started teaching in one of those community centers, but I felt a little bit out of my depth being so young and having, doctors in my class and lawyers and things like that. And so I felt, I was a bit like, oh, what do I know? But I did it and they enjoyed it and they came back. But then I started traveling again. So I traveled to South America, Central America, and then I taught traveling. So I taught travelers and people that lived there a little bit along the way. And then I came back a couple of years later. I came back, wasn't away for years, but at times in those years. And then I came back and started teaching in Holland a bit more regularly. And then I moved to Ireland. And that's where I really started teaching. So I moved to Ireland in the year 2000. And that's when I started. So I was teaching already for a couple of years on and off, but nothing super regular. And then in Ireland, I started my studio. I did another teacher training, Vinyasa.
Okay, see, now we're getting into the year 2000.
Yes.
It's so significant. I'm sorry to stop you, but it's a very significant signpost for me too. I get into yoga around 1994, 95, right?
Yeah.
And in 2000, a thing happens, like there's a upward trajectory of yoga going on.
Yeah,
and,
for sure.
I don't open my center until 2007, but it's sort of the same kind of thing. You were kind of like, the wave was just beginning. It was just, you were paddled out before everybody else and catching the wave,
Yeah. And then I did a Vinyasa Ashtanga training. Yeah,
Vinyasa
and I did that partly because I felt I wasn't there yet. Like I had only one training and I taught a little bit
and that training was super rooted in mystical experience, not necessarily more physicality like a vinyasa, right?
Yeah, and I did not feel ready for the physical part of that. And that training was really good because I had the basic, I actually didn't fall asleep anymore. I could really hear everything. And I needed the English because I obviously was taught in Dutch and I taught in Dutch, and then suddenly I was in an Irish country, in Ireland, and having to teach in English, and my English wasn't that great. So I was like, how am I going to do that? You know what, I'm going to follow yoga teacher training in English. That'll get me there. And that was a really good idea.
There you go. You use the languaging of the yoga class to help you get the language. That's very smart. Like when people watch TV to learn the language or whatever, to talk to people.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And so I read one other thing in your bio that I want to ask you about because it seems pretty significant in terms of like where things went for you. And I want to come back to actually like the online stuff. But first I want to ask about, I read something about a friend of yours who took his own life and that being a very significant moment. So I'm wondering when that happened. Was that after you were in Ireland or before?
Before I went to Ireland. It happened in 99 probably. So my friend took his own life. He was my best friend, Alex. We knew each other for a very long time, and He had been my boyfriend, but that was all the way at the beginning. So I wouldn't, I never referred to him as my ex, because that was actually quite not significant. The significant part was our friendship that came after. So we did a lot together, and I knew he went through a hard time. But when the news came that he had taken his own life, I was surprised as well. So I was surprised and not. But some people say, "Oh, I knew it," or "I could have known," or it wasn't that obvious to me. It was a real shock, and it was the first time I really. I mean, there were losses before, but not that close. So this was the first really close loss, and that's huge. That's so big in someone's life, and he was so close to me. So what I did is I stopped the study. I was at that point studying psychotherapy, hypnotherapy. So that was after my social studies, and I stopped. Or it was before that, I can't remember. It was around that time anyway. I stopped and I went to my mother, who was at that point traveling with her yacht through the Caribbean together with her partner.
Your mom sounds so cool. She's a yoga teacher. Now she's on a yacht in the Caribbean.
Yeah. So they got me over. They were like, "Ooh, I think she needs a bit of help." And so I stayed on the yacht for a while, and then I stayed in Curaçao for a few months, doing more working as a dive instructor and doing all sorts of other stuff, and get my head around it. It was a hard thing to go through. I'm grateful. It made me again look at life. What is life? Why would you live? What happens when you die? What is significant? I was forced to work with grief. So that's good, I suppose.
I bring it up because, as I'm turning 52 this year and reflecting back on the last 30 years of yoga being my thing, and I track it back, like, well, what is really this, like, origins of it in me? Why is it so important to me? Why did it become such a part of my life? And it is very connected to grief. My mom passed when I was 16. I had a deathbed experience with her that I can track back. That's the moment when, like we were saying earlier, I had an experience that made me convinced that there's more to it than what they say. That it's bigger or more, there's more possible than what we're sort of conditioned to believe, or what we just believe because it's our nature of misperception or whatever, however you want to think about it.
Yeah. And were you also, because that's what I felt every time someone close to me died, just that time after, I was so close to actually almost feeling blissful myself. It sounds awful. There was deep sadness, but there was this, not blissful, but there was this very deep presence. Like I was so present, so there, and that in itself is blissful. Up to the point where every time someone dies, sounds like it happened a lot, but it did happen quite a few times. Up to the point where every time that happens, I'm like believing it again, like, oh wow, so this is it. Like I could stay here, but then you're being snapped out a little bit after that. But I was snapped out after that. But it's just weird. Like it just.
Well, I also think that like grief can take you into a hole of despair that is unbearable.
Well, that happened after.
Yeah, you see, but it can also be kind of a real dealing with grief. For me, became the profoundest healing, where I came to see the passing as a blessing rather than like something horrible that happened to me.
Yeah, well, that's it. It's both. I've seen both. I've seen the incredible pain. So anybody who's going through it, I know, like what you're saying, the whole of grief, at some point, most likely that's where you end up, in that deep despair place. And if you find your way through that, there is so much.
You got to surrender. You got to surrender something. What it is you're exactly surrendering is probably for each person to determine, but there's a surrender. We said earlier, like a devotion and a surrender part.
Yeah.
And that is what led me into yoga, because I was rejecting like organized religion of my parents, Judaism and Christianity, and Eastern spirituality there was so much more possible. There was such this full spectrum of atheism to theism within yoga. You could kind of situate yourself anywhere you wanted along there, whatever you resonated for you, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Beautiful.
So that makes sense. So then you open up a studio in Ireland, you said?
Yes.
How big was it? Was it, like, how many people in the room? How many mats?
10, 11.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was super small. So it was, I did obviously in the beginning a lot of classes a week, and then I got another teacher in. I was never a studio owner. I just told her, look, use my room. This is the rent, but till you can afford that, just give me a percentage of the 3 people that you get.
And the rent was probably cheap enough that you could do that, right?
Yeah, the rent was nothing. It was just, so she really just, and she stayed forever. It was great, but she looked after her own thing, you know, and she filled in for me when I was gone, and we were just, you know, working together. It was just my space, but I don't know I do not have the experience of being a studio owner. I'm quite okay with that.
Yeah, but you see, it's what I said earlier about like leading up to before you start being a camera in front of yourself and filming yourself being an online yoga teacher. All that we just talked about has happened. And then this time, to me, the grinding it out and teaching all those classes and then having to clean up and the bathrooms afterwards and all of that for however many years. How many years did you have a run at that place?
11.
11 years. See, I had a 10-year run too.
Yeah.
Towards the end of it, you probably had more teachers maybe or whatever. Maybe it grew a little bit, right?
A bit more. Yeah. And I was ready to let it go.
Yes, me too. And by then, there's internet. The internet kicks in around whatever it was, 2005, 2006, 2007. We start to have internet, email lists, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's it.
So when is the first time that you shoot yourself on a video, and who was the one who had the idea to do it?
I was the one who had the idea to do it. I took a meditation retreat with my teacher, and suddenly I knew this is what I needed to do.
Now, wait a second. How did you know that? You got a message from God that said, make yoga videos? Or like, what else was playing into the calculus? Were you seeing things? Were you observing other people doing stuff online?
Yes,
or like,
of course.
How did you come to that?
So it was already there. People like, and there wasn't much. Like, there was maybe, what was there? Well, I'm not even sure if there was so much there. What was there was me looking for it. So I lived on a mountain in Ireland with not many teachers around, so I did not get fed.
If you are hearing this message, then you're listening to the free version of Jay Brown Yoga Talks. To hear the rest of our conversation, please subscribe to Podcast Premium at jbrownyoga.com/premium.